Hi, I'm TR11. Today we're going to be looking at how to make a crouching script in Roblox. This will be able to give you a smooth crouch when you press whatever button you'd like. We'll customize it, but you can customize the height. You'll be able to customize what button you push, the distance of the crouch, and so forth. And so let's just get right into it. I'm going to switch on over to a new workplace, a new workbench. Let's see here. We'll create a new local script, and we're gonna just call it. We'll just call it Crotch script. All right. And so, let's go over to here. Okay. So first thing we are going to do is we are going to. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to want to repeat wait, and you're going to want to check until, let's see, so we're going to type in game.players.localplayer. So this right here is going to pause the script until that it finds a player, and that the local player is there. So it means the player has joined the game, player's there, and then it will proceed. And we will do, we'll define our variable game.players.localplayer. So we're going to define the player that we just were looking for. Then we're going to get the character, and we're going to define that. So it's going to be player.character. So this is the actual player character of the player. We're going to use the user input service. So we need to define that. It's going to be game get service, user input service, not that. Let's do user input service. Then we're going to want to get the Tween Service. That is game get service, Tween Service. So we're just defining our services for later use. User input service, we'll be able to use that to, get the input from the player's keyboard, or if you were going to use a gamepad like a remote control, if you're playing, or VR input. So up to you how you want to do that, but we're going to make it so you can use any different input device. Tween service, this one is so you can tween between the vector 3 value. So you can have a 0 y, and then you can have a negative 5 y, and you can just say tween between that. It'll play an animation in the time you set on the value. We'll get into that later in the video, so that's just that for now. Right now, let's set the crouch tween info value. So it's going to be tween info dot new, and then we're going to do basically what we got here is you could do the time for the tween. So this is going to be when you press the button to C-frame, or not C-frame, but like when you're going to animate the up and down movement of the camera, you need to tween it. So basically what we're creating here is a new tween info. So we're defining what the tween will look like. So we can customize the length of it. So if you press C, it'll take 0.2 seconds to go down. Then we're going to customize the easing style and easing direction. These are actually a couple of different styles that you can choose from. I'm not going to go into in this video, but there are resources on the Roblox developer wiki looking at APIs. If you just look this up, it'll show you what they actually mean visually, so you can get a visual on that. It'll help you out a lot. You can understand it. But for this purposes of this video, this is just standard what most game developers use. It just looks good when you use this. Okay, so then we got the is crouching. So we're gonna want to define is crouching equals false, and then we're going to want to do so that's going to be when the player presses the crouch button, we don't want them spamming it and it'll just go all over the place. So we need to set it once, and then if the player is crouching, it'll help us define later on in the script whether or not we need to go up or down in the crouch function. So what we should do next is we need to set the camera mode to first person. Dot camera mode. So this is actually going to be for a first person. I should have mentioned that in the beginning, but it's going to be for a first person camera. You could modify this into a third person one, but you would need to add an animation to the player itself. And we're not going to get into that in this video, but this is mostly just for. But you could, if you wanted to modify this script, you could make it so that you could do it in third person. So we're going to go to Crouch. We're going to create a Crouch function. What we're going to do in this one is we're going to actually here. Let's start with the input. So let's actually do input first. So user input service dot input begin, and we're going to connect the function, and we're going to do this. So this is just a fancy way of doing basically the same thing here. So if you had input began, you could just put a function in here, but this is actually just a fancy way of putting a function inside these little brackets, so that way you don't have to make a name for it. You can just put it in there. We're going to get the variable for the input, so that whenever input has began, we're going to get set values in here that we can view for our purposes of this. So I'll show you right here. So we're going to do if input dot user input type equals enum dot user input type dot keyboard, and then we're going to do then if input dot keycode equals dot keycode C and is crouching equals false. Then so basically how this works is when the player presses a key on their keyboard, we're going to want to check that the input is coming from the keyboard and not another input source like a gamepad or a mouse. If you were using a gamepad, you would just change this to one of the other options in here. You have, gamepad 1, gamepad 2, 3, 4, 7, We got other different ways, and you got mouse input, mouse wheel. So it could be another way that the input's coming in. But this actually just tells us, hey, it's a keyboard. You can continue. For the key code, basically what this is it's a value within the input variable that we have that tells you what the key code is. So the key code here is, I'm just setting it to C. You can set it to whatever you'd like the crouch button to be. So actually up here, let's just define a variable crouch button. Actually, let's do crouch key code, and we'll set that to enum dot keycode dot C. So basically, whenever we are inputting, we're going to check the key code and make sure that it's the key code that we have set as the crouch button. You could set this to another variable. If you have a custom input mapping, you could change this to however you'd like, but for the purposes of this video, we don't really need to do that. We're just, setting it to C. But you could do like left shift, and it would do the left shift button or left control. Actually, let's just do left control because that would be nice. We could try that out. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to check, is the player crouched? So when we press down, we're going to want to make sure that we got this part of the if statement that says if they're crouching, if they're not crouching, basically. So is crouching is set to false. We're going to want to do is crouching true because they are crouching. So here we go. We're going to set it to true. So that way you can't just the camera won't reset at the top. We'll see later on, but basically you're going to have a variable. If your head's up here and you're where you're crouching, your head would be is down here. we're going to make sure that we don't want to reset the tween up here and just, you can't, it won't glitch it out. Basically, it's a preventative way. It's basically a bool value that'll help us stop the, from being, if they were to spam the button, then the camera will just go all over the place. So this is a way of only allowing the function to happen one time, basically. So here we've got input began. We can just copy this entire thing over, and we're going to switch the is crouching to true because we're going to switch this to ended. And we're going to connect that. So when the input has ended, so when you let go of the left control button, it's going to check if it's keyboard. So basically, right here, when any key is let up, if you push down the spacebar and let it up, it's going to run this function and say, okay, the spacebar was pushed, or was let go. It's going to detect it as a keyword. So yes, it was a keyboard, but it was not the correct key code because we set the key code to the left control. So if it was a spacebar, it would just stop right here. It wouldn't run this. But since we've set it to left control, we're going to run the rest of the function, and it's going to be, it's going to check, is crouching. So currently it is crouching. So as long as we are crouching, we're able to move forward in the script. So what we're going to do is we're going to start working on this crouch function. I've pre-wrote this script so that way I can go through it and show you, everything without making it on the fly. So first thing we're going to do when we run the crouch is we're going to get the humanoid, because there's actually a setting within the humanoid itself that allows for you to adjust the camera without using the actual camera itself in Workspace. So what we're going to do is define the humanoid variable. So we're going to want to do character, and then we're going to want to do find first child. This is a function within the, or method within the model instance. Basically what it does, or any instance, you can run this find first child and it will find the first child with this name in the hierarchy. So if I went to do a humanoid, imagine this was a humanoid, you would just do, this was the player, character of the player. So when we spawn in, I'll show you right now. So when we spawn in, so here's our character. Then in there, we're gonna look for the humanoid. Why we would do find first child is instead of just doing dot humanoid, is if the character dies in game, then the humanoid may not be there. It may reset, and it's going to be a new like instance that comes up. So now that we have defined humanoid, this will return a value, or it will return nil if it can't find one. So what we do is if humanoid, then. So this text, okay, there is a valid variable, a value, and it's not just nothing. It's not just a nil value. So humanoid does exist. Then we can say, okay, since humanoid does exist, we can do if is crouching equals false, then we're going to want to set the, we'll get there in a second. We're going to do that. So we're going to do an else statement, else if statement, and we're going to do true. So we could just do an else statement, but I want to set this to, I like to see the visual of, okay, false, true. You could set an else, it's up to you. This will be a way that we know it's working right, though. So next thing we're going to want to do is actually create the goal table here. So what this is it's for the tween So when we actually create the tween here, it's going to allow us to set the goal variable here. So what I'll do is I'll just write goal dot camera offset equals vector 3 dot new 0, 0, 0. So the humanoid has a variable in it called the camera offset, and when you set that to, so normally it's set to 0, 0, 0, and that's just the standard. But if we want to make the effect that the camera is dropping, 2 studs while they're in first person, we're going to want the character to, we're going to want to set the humanoid's camera offset to -2. So we set it there, but this is the goal. So if we are currently not crouching, then when this is ran, so it's going to be the input ended because it detects, okay, is crouching true? No. Or yes, it is true, and we let it up, so we're going to want to set it to false. Now we're no longer crouching. We're going to run the crouch function. Crouch function is going to run, and it's going to go through and detect everything. Then once you get to the is crouching, it's going to detect which one of these two it is. So if we are currently, we're letting go of the key, it's going to say, okay, the goal of the new goal of the tween is going to be the camera offset value of the humanoid, which we're going to define that in just a second here. But the variable that we want to change in the targeted object is the camera offset value. So what the goal is 0, 0, 0, which is the basic standard camera position for the player when they're in first person. If we were going to be going from no crouching to crouching, it's going to be -2 or however many studs you'd like. You could do 1.5 or 0.5 or 1. But I'm just setting it to 2 because it'll be fine for the tutorial. So now once we have set that, we're going to create a new tween, and we're going to do a crouch tween equals tween service create humanoid. So let me back up here. The create. So the create function takes a couple of values. Let me make sure I get this right. So, oh gosh. Okay, so it takes the object that you are manipulating. So that is the humanoid. And then the tween info that we created earlier is basically the settings for the tween. So this crouch tween we're creating these are the actual settings that we have set prior. So 0.2 takes 0.2 seconds to go down. These are the animation style we have set, and then we're going to set the goal. So this is what we want to change in the humanoid value. So when the player presses the crouch button, it's going to say, okay, we need to take our current position and change it to this or this. So we'll take a look here right now because we're just about done. So whenever you create a new tween, you need to play it because, of course, you do. Okay, play, and we're there. So this should work normally. All we need to do now is go in, walk around, and then if you press left control, you'll have a nice smooth transition downward. Pretty simple. All you do is just press control, and yeah, it's just normal. We're in first person, so we can't control the camera from here. If you wanted to do that, you would just need to modify. What do you modify? You need to modify. You need to take this out. So we're not going to be in first person. If you were to see what it would look like, you could still do the camera offset. It's just that it will go down as if, like that. So what you would want to do is just make an animation and play it along with the crouch tween. And you would need to modify it a little bit so that the head lines up and it doesn't look weird. But that would just take some tweaking. So that's about it for this tutorial. You can modify, the values if you wanted it to take a little bit less time. You could just set it to 0.1. Excuse me. If you wanted to, you can make it really fast and really, really short distance when you crouch, instead of being such a long drop down, -2. So, it's just a lot quicker. So there's the crouch, as long, it's not nothing, because nothing would just look real bad if you didn't have any tween at all. But that's basically the whole script for this tutorial. As usual, you can modify it as on your own or do whatever you'd like. Appreciate you watching this. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. If you'd like to suggest a new tutorial, just let me know in the comments and we will look at that. Or I will look at that and make whatever you guys would like. So, thanks so much. Bye.